Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile and I can't wait for us to dig deeper into the upcoming episode. And today my guest is Jack Mardack, who is a co-founder of Oyster, a globally recognized B Corp revolutionizing the future of work. And also back in 2022, they became a unicorn. And we will explore how Jack's career has been shaped by a mission to create economic balance through global talent distribution, and his groundbreaking approach to remote work and the personal philosophy, spirituality, leadership journey. So, yeah, let's wait no more and let's explore the future of work. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox, and today I would like to welcome Jack to the show. So, Jack had an incredible career journey from leading to companies like Eventbrite. I also saw in your resume Prezi and also co-founding Oyster, which is a B Corp unicorn transforming how we think about work. So, Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shivla. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for the kind invitation.
I'm so glad to have you here. So, look, your whole career story and career path is incredible, inspiring. We can see many top-notch names in your resume if you look at from the let's say, strict or LinkedIn vibes approach. But I would like to hear your story. So what really first sparked your curiosity for this whole innovation, problem solving, entrepreneurship? Where is it coming from?
That's a great question, and thanks for asking. I've had a chance recently to kind of reflect on these very, very early beginnings of my career journey. I guess, of course, like most children, there is a period of transition from the relative freedom and lack of structure of childhood and early life. And then, you go to school, and then seemingly as an escalation in structure from that, quite dramatic escalation in structure from early childhood, we go into work. So I've been thinking about that, those very early steps, like how does a child from someone's employee, and I think that's something that we should absolutely, as a civilization, think about, since it seems that having a job, being someone's employee in some way, even if the definition of that relationship evolves a bit in the future, it seems like we're stuck with that. It seems like that's going to be a part of our lives, and I think the way that I would characterize at the most macro level, the most profound effects of the last few years, the interruption of the world of work by the pandemic, is we have a chance to think deeply about these things and kind of do a reset. So this is my context, and so my own journey began. I suppose I was a bit of a creative child, right? I mean, I had an affinity for, like a lot of kids do, perhaps even most kids. They say that in the beginning, all children are artists. That's before the world has sort of responded to their art and had and influenced them. So I was certainly fond of expressing myself artistically, and I was also fond of figuring out how things work. It could be, a coaster, could be, the U.S. Electoral College, but I cite these two, kind of basic attributes. I like to make things, and I like the feeling of figuring things out. I think those are the core building blocks of my ultimate employee persona, and sort of looking very, very, very fundamentally at those building blocks in the beginning helps me to understand my career and the choices that I made, very consistently, which is why it's been been fruitful for me to be reflecting on these things in the last little while, since I think it's helping me kind of in a sense understand who I am better. And so I think it was the case for me, and I think it will be the case for a lot of children, that there is a sense of alignment test between the things that you seem to enjoy, right? These sort of raw feelings, making things, being creative, figuring things out. In my case, just to use my own two examples, it seems like there comes a time when you're kind of trying to fit that in a very broad way to the world of work. Um, for me, it didn't happen that way. I got exposed to another aspect of the work life via my mother, who from the age of about 8 or 9 years old simply told me that I was going to be a doctor. Right?
Way.
Yeah, I think it happens. Lots of kids get told by their parents, and they sort of have certain parents certainly have kind of a very narrow or very limited conception of what a successful career looks like. But in any event, what I wanted to say is that because he just sort of declared me a doctor. I mean, I'm 8 or 9 years old. Who knows what attributes or what affinities, maybe I'm a little bit clever, but certainly I haven't demonstrated, certainly I haven't earned in any way, but I became exposed to the brand aspect of having a certain job from a very early age. And so there I was being introduced by my mother, who of course, recruited all of her friends and everyone that we met into the effort of like ultimately building her son's confidence. This is my son; he's going to be a doctor. And so I got walking into a room at a very early age and having that feeling of this thing that I had not. What's the doctor? Who cares? And so my first meaningful exposure into the world of work came from a brand standpoint, and um, it was done to me by my mother, who branded me
Yeah.
a doctor,
As a doctor.
that stuck for a very long time, like 10 years, because it wasn't until I was in college in pre-med at NYU, having already gone to pre-med high school, which was kind of, this is back in the 80s, where we're doing hematology and urinalysis in the 10th grade. So this is heavy early exposure to the world of medicine that I had, when I was 14, 15 years old. So I was definitely on that going to be a doctor track all the way into NYU. And then there was a convergence of factors where I'm falling out of love with this. I'm feeling other interests, especially creative side of things. I think I've been on a kind of autopilot for a long time where I haven't really been thinking. The last thing I've been thinking about is, the actual work.
Mhm.
That's oh, there's some lab stuff. We're cutting pigs, we're working with microscopes. And so I imagine that it would be, stuff like that, right? But I hadn't ever stopped to think deeply about the nature of the work itself. So like around 22 years old, I'm falling out of love with this idea. I'm losing the momentum, if you will. And also right around then, my mom, ironically, who was, as you know, the chief proponent behind this doctor idea, she got sick. And so I dropped out of pre-med. I dropped out of NYU to get a job
Mhm.
all of a sudden, out of necessity to care, right? And so how did I go about getting a job? So I've had this early training in the benefits of branding, doctors, as well as, clearly there's some more steps, and plus I'm not, to becoming a doctor. Plus I'm not really feeling it, so I need to go and do something else. But I'm not going to go, work at McDonald's, right? And so looking back at this core stuff of like, what do you like to do? What are you good at? And so I go into the figure things out bucket, and I put the creative bucket sort of on the shelf, right? And I realized that, this bucket seems to be a key ingredient in a lot of different jobs that like the world seems to find valuable. And perhaps in a few cases also prestigious. It's this, I'm kind of addicted to this part by now, having been, on my way to becoming a doctor for 10 years. So I go into banking for satisfying these criteria. I saw, this is literally just me in my head thinking, I can absolutely do that. It seems that there's layers like, quote, career, there's work to be found. And so from pre-med dropout, I manufacture this banker persona. And I put it that way because, whenever, it's only at a latter stage that I think that, I think people or young people, I don't know, maybe, but it was a case for me, think of themselves as sort of rigidly themselves versus each time you have a new job, you're kind of showing up as a totally new person, which is part of the excitement of getting a new job. It is also kind of a personal reinvention opportunity. And so I absolutely invented the banker person that went and was like an industry analyst, and it was basically my job to look at industries and companies and and predict their outcomes, their ability to pay or grow, etc. So it was wonderful preparation for the world of business, which I haven't been thinking about at all. I go from being sort of a sciencey person who's like really just zooming along on the inertia installed by his mother on this whole doctor thing, and admittedly nice sort of social benefits. I go from that mode into this. Now I'm an analyst. Now I'm working with data, which thankfully I'm good at. I understand spreadsheets, and it seems I can create value and positive validation for myself, which go together from this basket of activities called banker or finance person. Right. And so, that was great. And that's what I did very, very strategically, like, hey, we need health insurance, I need some income. And by the way, there were these other considerations of job having that I'm going to see if I can also, create, which is, for myself, a feeling of like, I'm doing things that feel good to do. Right. And it seems that somebody values those things. Great, right? And that was it. That was the beginning. And that was like, those were the first few lines of what I would call like a career operating system that I've been sort of updating gradually, which is like, do things that feel good and seem to be affirmed by others and, deemed valuable, and the world attaches some degree, let's say, like, oh yeah, oh, cool, whatever. Like, I hadn't really thought about it very much, but I suppose I'm a simple young man thinking about things like dates and marriage and, right, and my suitability for the world. I wasn't thinking about purpose at all.
Yeah. But then how did
at all.
all those career experiences like Eventbrite, Prezi, because it seems like you joined those companies at the really early stage, right? So when everything is uncertain, there is no some kind of structure. Usually the startups in that stage are in super chaos. Money is still just coming. Money is just in the future. How did you, someone who was about to go to be a doctor or a medical person, then switched into banking and looking for all those, not purpose, but regular life needs, ends up in the startup world?
Yeah. Quite by accident.
Love it.
It's like so much that happens. And so sometimes in life you're pushing away from things, and sometimes you're moving towards things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say that I was very much pushing away from finance. I didn't love it. I was like just too dark. Like, I didn't like the people. I wanted, creative zest and energy. It just seemed so inwardly toiling, like not making anything. And so it's a little bit of both. I was mainly pushing away because I didn't have a clear idea of what I was going towards. And so by the late 90s, I had become infatuated with the early internet and had become a publisher and a creator. There's that creative bucket that I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had a chance to really visit very much for the 5 years that I spent in finance. And so I'm falling in love with the changes that are coming to the world, that are, and I'm being excited by the implications of communication, radical communications transformation on planet Earth. And so I moved mm, to the Bay Area, and that was a move that itself had several catalysts. One of them was a romantic catalyst, which always
Mm-hmm.
helps, you know, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna put myself in a truck, and so I made the move, and I got very, very lucky to wind up being an active participant in the incredible journey of Silicon Valley as a place where companies are made. I participated in the making of several companies, which was
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And in applying that test of aligning your core abilities with work to be done is your answer to the why of of startups. It turned out that one of the things that I suppose in hindsight, good at, although you're not aware of it as it's happening, it seems I was good at ambiguity. I was
Okay.
good. I was undaunted. We don't know. We don't know. We haven't seen this before. This is a new problem. I had been, I suppose, from a science days background, a big fan of first principles thinking as a way of attacking problems. And so that was super relevant and super helpful to the variety of problems of creating company, launching products, tapping new markets. And so that was one piece. And startups themselves were also conveniently lacking in rigidity of function in the very beginning. Right? There's just like these jobs to be done, and in the best cases, you've attracted a number of smart people, to come and try to work together on some outcomes. To me, that was like amazing. The simplicity of that, which is we have an arbitrary set of problems which intersect themes of human behavior and design and technology, right? And we're going to try, we're going to try to get these people to buy that thing or to use that product. And of course, those problems are nested in the bigger problem of we're trying to create a company, we're trying to create value. So I'm so happy in those problem spaces of creating products, getting them to market, finding users, demonstrating behavior, improving, modeling things theoretically. Those are all like my heaven from a things to use my brain on standpoint. And so, it felt like a success that I had gotten myself into a place where I had a job, right? Back
Yeah.
to that, where I'm getting to do these things that I really, really, really enjoy in the course of the day. And I mentioned, in the best cases, we'd be working with some really, really smart people. Line that I would soon add to my career operating system. That's what I have. Career operating system is what I have unconsciously because I don't have a conscious plan. What I have is
Mm-hmm.
a career operating system. So I'm
Yeah.
writing lines of code. And so at one point I ride, just go to work for the smartest people that will have you. And what it doesn't matter, and whatever, whether it's a failure or a success, you're going to learn something. So at some point I start, selecting for that, because
Mm-hmm.
I could go and do this work lots of different places, right? Let's say. And so it becomes apparent to me, it becomes and therefore important that I begin to select for the smartest people that I can find and figure, well, whatever else, it'll be incrementally better. And that's really more recently, like the most recent line that I've written to my code is, work with the most ethical people you can find as well.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of important. Yeah, yeah, really clever. is great, but not, not without ethics and principles. Yeah, and
100%.
that's a great segue for, for talking about
Yeah.
my partnership with Tony James, my co-founder at Oyster. Yeah,
So
yeah,
before we head into the Oyster story, I have one more question. You mentioned a bit about like at the beginning, you did not really have the purpose. Now we're talking about this code, about the ethics. When did purpose came into your life actually?
yeah.
When did you start setting it?
Yes, it's so simple. I mean, it's like textbook. As soon as you become a little bit successful and
Uh-huh.
you have an opportunity to reflect and, to start thinking about other people, and your personal impact. For me, again, like a lot of people, I found a way to give back by a nonprofit. I was on the board of a nonprofit in San Francisco called CASA, which focuses on improving outcomes for kids in the foster system. I was also, through the Taproot Foundation, an advisor to literally dozens of other Bay Area nonprofits. The marketing hat on, basically helping them tell their stories better, so that they could fundraise more effectively. That's how I, largely that's how I tried to help
Mm-hmm.
other nonprofits, and it was great. It was wonderful exposure to, different kinds of governance problems, especially on the board of a nonprofit, and I found the work super gratifying. However, it also confirmed for me that nonprofits, while super important at the local level, they're probably not the right form of organization for going after the world's most pressing, global scale
Mm-hmm.
problems: economic inequality,
Yeah.
gender disparity, racial inequality, just a touch on those. And so it started me thinking, what is the right form for going after it? And I became very, very excited about the idea that for-profit organizations with a little bit of tuning,
Mm-hmm.
with a slight shift in perspective, could readily become agents for a positive impact, particularly in the form of what we like to call business model impact, which is positive impacts that derive from and are a manifestation of the way that the business has chosen to do its business. For us, it's building a global employment platform that solves for all the countries of the world from an employment
Mm-hmm.
complexity standpoint, and in so doing creates a bridge of unprecedented opportunity between employers in the developed world and ready knowledge workers in the developing world. As our business grows, so does our impact. And so I think that is a view that all kinds of for-profit organizations can adopt, and in so doing, especially at scale. I think business is
Yeah.
is a big is a very important lever in making the world better going forward. And we need to encourage those businesses that are doing that, and we need to encourage the adoption of standards such as B Corp,
Mm-hmm.
that are important to that macro behavioral transformation that we're trying to affect across the business sector. Yeah, I'm super passionate
100%.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that. So it seems like that was your kind of a bit of a moment for the oyster roots, right? Can you tell us a bit
Well, 100%. Yeah.
how did oyster come into your life? And also, I'm very curious to know. You already mentioned how did you find your co-founder? Because you
Right.
know it's very
So
important
yeah,
part of
Tony.
building something.
Yeah. So Tony and I met at his prior company called Nexmo, um, that was later acquired by Vonage. Um, Tony and I, we had a great time working together, great chapter at that company. Post acquisition, Tony was there for like a year. I was there for like 2 years post acquisition. It's really,
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating. Back to the career lens. First time at a publicly traded company of that scale. A lot to learn. Absolutely, there was a growth chapter for me. But we were keen to work together again, and we had been in a semi-continuous conversation about what's next, for a couple of years, and in that time had having a chance to uh, enjoy and affirm our shared commitment to some important ideas that have been rolled into Oyster that relate to the way people work, right? Like we had amongst the outcomes of experience building several companies, several startups, as you see
Mhm.
what works, what doesn't. You have a chance to form opinions. Given a chance, wouldn't you love to have a company work in just this way? And so we were absolutely in sync on the principles of fully remote. This is before the pandemic. Fans
That's wild.
of companies like Buffer and Automatic and GitLab
Yeah.
that have been saying for years, this is amazing. We were all on that bandwagon. And we were also passionately aligned on this idea that for-profit organizations could be inspired, is really the right word, to a new rubric of behavior, let's say, that if adopted by lots of companies could really, really have a positive impact across many of the most critical global scale problems that we face. Like I said, social
Mhm.
justice, gender disparity, etc. And so it was Tony's voila, the idea for Oyster, and it was incredible to recognize immediately, the potential to have this very, very, very special kind of business that could, as I like to say, mix oil and water, which is be both a high growth software company and a HR tech, category,
Mhm.
and this simultaneously, this rarer thing, I think, right, which is a meaningful machine that is producing uh, scalable positive impact, in our case, redressing problems of economic inequality and other related factors to parts of the world like brain drain, etc.
Yeah.
So we recognize that. That was the, which is
Wow.
the incredible alignment between the business model and impact, which indicated an extraordinary potential to be both a very large commercial success and um, a big machine for positive social impact.
During our conversation, you mentioned before the episode, right? Human distribution problem, right? What does that mean for you, and why do you think it's
Yeah,
critical for our future of work?
yeah. It's great to think about this very abstract problem. The data comes from Korn Ferry, and I think that the number is like $5 trillion is what they call a knowledge worker talent gap, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
means that many aggregate knowledge work jobs are unmet in today or in the visible future. And that might be okay, or it would be a boomer. So let's think about what that means first, right? So multi-trillions of knowledge worker jobs being unfilled at any given moment in time means that we have a very significant gap of execution relative to the total knowledge work that we're trying to do on planet Earth. And when you reflect that it's from that knowledge work that invention and innovation that moves us forward comes from, when you have a gap of execution of that magnitude, undone knowledge work jobs, it means that civilization itself is moving forward more than it could be, than it should be. Right? But it's not that we don't have the people on planet Earth, right? The
Mm-hmm.
problem is fixable because we have the ready knowledge workers on planet Earth. They're just not conveniently located in those places, countries, and cities where historically one has had to live, be located physically in order to have those jobs. So the big picture, right? A very, very big one is we can correct, we can close some of the gap of execution and move forward as a civilization every bit as fast. Which is, should we is a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah.
But let's say largely it's good. Largely it's good. And I'm thinking about UA, obviously, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think I think largely it's good, and at every phase of major innovation, technologically, which is of course the only innovation, that matters now from an economic growth standpoint. Which is the other piece that is nice, because while we're doing that, it means that we're not pulling it out of the earth, which is also good. But each time we have one of these big waves, the value of knowledge work seems to increase dramatically too, right? And so that be happening at the same time as we are democratizing access to knowledge work jobs seems very powerful, right? Like, let's say pre-software engineering knowledge work distribution, like, okay, cool, right? But 2024 AI, world of AI knowledge work democratization is, if only in the imagination, easily orders of magnitude more valuable and more accelerated. So it's a great time for this to be happening as well. So that's what we mean by the human distribution problem, totally fixable via remote work. And of
Yeah.
course, that's not the only piece. And our piece is, of course, the enablement of the employment. But there are other structural layers that are important in that piece, which is things like access to internet.
Yeah.
The tens of millions of knowledge workers around the world are otherwise prepared and connected and ready, which has implications into educational sectors, which has ripples into how we evaluate candidates in the future. Great, these are all
Yeah.
fun problems, but those are all things that have to be solved, I would say, as well, before we can bring the teeming masses of ready developing world knowledge workers online.
But Jack, sometimes it seems like when it comes to the remote work and you speak to some maybe more conservative people who are running the companies, that it does require the mindset shift, right? To really put on board people that even being remote, you can achieve the same best results. My question would be, what does Oyster and you guys with your whole team are doing differently to actually onboard people for this whole remote world, I don't know, lifestyle? That
Yeah,
would be the right way to
yeah,
say.
yeah. I'm happy to talk about this because it's so important, as people who are not doing this fully distributed thing, and by that I mean Oyster is in its own example a
Mm-hmm.
company of about 600 people, which doesn't have offices anywhere in the world,
And
and
no
we have
offices?
no offices, and
Wow.
we have a geographic diversity to the tune of about 70 different countries, right? So that's
That's
so
what I,
that's so that's
yeah.
us. So I always take very seriously the question, how does the human side of things work?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, are we getting that stuff? And so I would say, I think we are absolutely getting it. We're getting it in a different way, though. And that way is itself not an accident, but the result of having been extremely deliberate in the design and the crafting of our way of working from the very, very beginning. And so to speak to a head of HR or someone who's championing being fully distributed in their own organization, to speak to them, I would say, that the only successful way to begin this journey is not from, we need to grant this as a concession because some of our best people are threatening to leave, so we need to do it. I mean, I feel you. If that's your case, it's a signal. But I would say that the only right foot with which to begin the journey is from recognizing the incredible benefits and gains and flexibility and quality of life for everyone in the organization that are enabled by having no offices, right? Which is different from some offices, people going to the office some amount of the time, even though we're treating hybrid as kind of a sliding scale, like,
Mm-hmm.
somehow a balance, like it's an equivocation. It isn't. It's binary. Having no offices is one thing, which is very different from having anybody in the office at any time. And so I would say, if what you're contemplating is the former, this offices thing, I want to say, the potential for human connection has been surprising and extraordinary. And by that, I mean that it absolutely feels as though the depth of human connection, the quality of human connection can be achieved. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same way, but the way that I look at it is we do have opportunities to meet in person. For example, we sometimes go to conferences where a number of people will be attending, and these
Yeah.
will, apart from, it's always fun to go to a conference for a company like Oyster, it also creates the special opportunity for people who may have not met before, who have only met a couple of times, to see each other and spend time. And so what I can say is that there is a new math that I see, which is, you know, 50 hours on Zoom plus 3 hours in Vegas adds up to something that is every bit as rich as, you know, sitting in a cubicle next to this person, mostly never talking to them except on Slack, and maybe once a week going out to lunch with them, which is like,
Mm.
you know, commonly the kinds of patterns that people who are, quote, really socializing, really the sort of, being friends, do, in the office. So I would say I've seen the combination of virtual experience with your colleagues and IRL experiences add up to something that absolutely feels as rich and satisfying from a friendship and from a human standpoint. And we shouldn't be surprised by this, right? Because we have evidence of that working on, in the social slash romantic dimension for a long time. People have been building connection, finding each other online for
Yeah.
for over 20 years. All we need now is to believe in that, in the domain of work, and to make sure that we're cleverly providing those use cases and problem solving, for a fully distributed company. One of our little uh, practices is something called a donut, which is a bot that lives inside Slack, and it randomly connects you with other people in the
Yeah.
organization for a not work related, totally random, totally casual conversation. It does the scheduling. So that's so lovely because it
Yeah.
that replaces the kind of more chaotic serendipity of running into someone by the water cooler or in the parking garage, because we don't have those. And so it's cite that as just a little example. There are lots of aspects of the design of the work experience that we've created at Oyster that are intended to specifically foster and encourage human closeness, that human peace, which is
Mm.
so great at work, which is like, if I want to spend my day in this activity or so many hours of my life, can it also be, amazingly human as well? Yes, is the
Yeah.
answer.
But what about the loneliness, right? So especially after the COVID hit, we've kept seeing a lot of stats and different articles highlighting the downside of the remote work. But if you don't see other people, if you're working from home, the loneliness might hit, etc. How are you approaching this topic? And you
Yeah.
mentioned, of course, the donut. Actually, in one of my remote companies I used to work with, we use donut, and it's really a great way to interact with people with whom we maybe usually don't work. But what would be your take on that? Can we actually be less lonely by working remote? Because overall, we're such a lonely humanity right now and
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah. A super profound question, and its answer transcends just the work slice of our lives, right? Because it is not just at work, let's say, where we are remote. You might say that we are increasingly remote in all kinds of social
Mhm.
participation, which has become the norm for a lot of people. So I would say, too soon to tell. Too soon to tell for humanity total, like, what the general isolation of everyone is doing. Work, you might say, is like a new territory where for many people for a long time, the norm has been show up at the office. That is now changing for a lot of people. So I think it's important to understand that this is additive. This is incremental remoteness, right, against a backdrop where we are already very, very remote and, kind of in ourselves. Is that good for humanity? I don't know. I don't know. I
We
think
will
it's too
see.
soon to tell. But I will
Yeah.
tell you what is, I will tell you what is real. What is real is giving people the power of control and flexibility over their own daily lives so that they can bring work into balance with other things that for them are non-negotiable, like kids or illness, right? Being a caretaker. That is absolutely real. And so I think to the extent that we can learn this, we can transcend it, that leadership, yes, can evolve, that we can get over the fixation on wanting to control people, which is just leftover inertia from the factory era, because we're still, our brains are still, I'm paying how many people to do what? You can't think of it that way. You can't think of owning their hours anymore, but that will take some time. That will take some time. So, to your question about what do I say to those companies? I'd say
Yeah.
the most important thing is chart your course deliberately, know why, take the demands of all important stakeholders into account, including your people. I would say, that being deliberate changed everything for us. And you mentioned onboarding, and that's such an important case because it is the first exposure that people have to the organization, and we have such clear examples of like first day at work kinds of things that happen at the office. They might take you to lunch. There might be,
Yeah.
flowers
Kind of
or
cuddle up.
swag kit on your desk. And so there are these things that create, let's call it feeling, right? And so we were conscious to look for ways that were unique, different to this arrangement that could give people a very, very nice feeling. And that feeling is not just about welcome and warm, but because we go beyond the onboarding, even of like an office-based company, because one of the things at the office is there's not a lot of instructions. We don't need them, right? It's like, well, here's your team, go, right? You know how to do knowledge work, don't you? You're in an office, that's your computer, right? But when there's nothing, you have to specify everything. So at Oyster, onboarding, and I'm very proud of it because it's like a product we've worked on
Okay.
iteratively from the very beginning. Your onboarding is intended to get you to a feeling of immersion and warmth and human familiarity with your team and other people, and also to get you up to a place of confidence and readiness in a designed, milestone driven way, which most companies don't bother with. So so one unexpected aspect of removing the office is that you remove all of the behavioral inertia that was uncritiqued and unreviewed and unowned. Who is responsible for the way
Yeah.
we work at the office? It's not HR. It hasn't been. It hasn't been HR. So that's the other piece I should say. Make sure that as you're thinking about this, that you're prepared to fully empower your HR team to bring this about, whether you've decided to be fully remote, whether you've decided to be hybrid, whether you've decided to be in the office. I think at a minimum, take away from the radically changing perspective of the last 5 years around the world of work. At a minimum, from that, take away giving ownership of how your company works to HR.
Mhm.
Do that at a minimum. It shouldn't be like IT, right?
I have two questions about remote work. One thing, how do you work? Do you work more like kind of regular office hours, or are you more like async way of working, or it's a combination of both?
Yeah. Well, so we have people in 70 countries, so the lights are always
That's
on for someone. And so we have a concept called follow the sun, which is an elegant way of us imagining as a mental model the cycling through the day from the people who, for whom the day begins first, all the way through to the people for whom the day begins last. I'm in California, so I'm on the tail end of that. So it starts by imparting the right perspective for everyone. So we all have the right mental model. It's kind of like we imagine work being passed from one fifth, as you if you will,
yeah.
to the next. And from that mental model, we also have nice, we have tools and rules, which is we use Slack, but we don't just use Slack, we use it this way. There's subtlety. A lot of organizations have given people some communications tool, but haven't gone the extra step of really designing a way for these tools to be used. Because of course, with a tool like Slack, there are lots of different ways to use it. So to answer your question, we're very, very asynchronous. We're
Mm-hmm.
asynchronous by default. An example of a tool and rule combo is on Slack, we never expect an instant response. Even if that person shows active green light, we never, treat it that way. We always allow, even let's say if there's a lot of urgency and, certainly an instant response is welcome as a matter of
Mm-hmm.
courtesy, because we don't know what, they could be balancing in their life right at that moment. So little things like that, that make a difference day to day and collectively set a tone for the way that we're trying to work. And guess what? The most amazing part is, as a bonus, this is how you make culture.
Mm.
This is how culture permeates, right? With these mental models, principles, little things underneath the principles. But that is how we have been able to bring the extraordinary culture to day life.
Yeah.
That we've built at Oyster. People say, "Wow, it's for a lot of companies, it's like this plaque on the wall, with some adjectives, right? Inert, and unfelt, right? Ironically so.
Mm-hmm.
When people walk by, it's like, well, we sure didn't abide that adjective today, did we? Yes, right. And so, very different from seeing our principles brought to life, enacted in the choices that we make about how we work. This is where culture lives, right? That's what makes it real. And that's why people feel it in spite of not walking around together in an office.
Yeah. So, how do you see the future of work?
Yeah. Well, there's so many directions to take that. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I think that AI is an exciting new wave. We'll continue to see waves where the creative power that is being conferred on human beings continues to expand in dramatic ways. And as a result, the things that we can do both individually and collectively as teams is going to grow exponentially, blah, 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 right? But I believe in that, and it really, really, really excites me. And I feel so lucky to get to see those transformations happen in my own life. To get to see like the tools that we've made that create new powers for people that they haven't had before. I'm really, really inspired by that. So I think that we're going to see more of that. Um, one interesting data point that I read, this is related, which is they're predicting that like the first 30-person company to get to $100 million in AR. So ways like that are
Yeah.
also cool and really clear of showing us that we're doing more with tickets. So that's the future of work, right? Is
Yeah.
$100 million AR companies with small teams just been able
All
to rock out
right.
effectively.
Yeah.
The other piece that I'm excited about is I reference the history of work where work started. If you draw the line backwards in history, it doesn't get better for workers, right? It gets worse and worse and worse, really, really bad the farther you go, for the worker side of the equation. So I think it's important to recognize that, we're still tipping that balance progressively, incrementally in the favor of the worker. The union movement of the middle of the 20th century was important. We all know ensuring safety standards of compensation and elements, political aspects of that discussion aside. I think we can all agree that it helped tip things better in favor of the worker side of the equation. More recently, like before the pandemic, this conversation and discussion around gig workers, like who's an employee at Uber? What do they get? What are they entitled to?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, well, but you're a contractor. No, I'm not. I'm showing up every day. I think this was a very, very important tension. And I think the dialogue
Yeah.
that came that resulted from that tension and the outcomes of that dialogue, super important for like, oh, our expectations, and it's like, and us understanding that there's a continuum for people and companies. And now fast forward the post-pandemic world, I think the future work is we're going to continue to see the smartest companies taking a very holistic perspective over taking care of their people. It's not gummy bears and ping pong tables, right? So I think the ways in which the most progressive companies, the companies that want to really show love for their people, I think that is an interesting evolution. And I think things like location flexibility is just
Yeah,
part of that. It's just part of that. You know,
100%.
it doesn't start there. It's just part. It's just part of
Yeah.
that. And I think that we're going to see more things like people having multiple knowledge work jobs at the same time. Because of course, when we ask employers to let go of this selfish, jealous possession of a person's time, they might do your job in an hour of their day. Who cares? Especially point one about the evolution of knowledge work. I think it's getting more
Exactly.
powerful. So yeah, I mean, we've got to let go
Yeah.
as employers and work with people in different constructs, right? We're
Yeah.
engaging with now knowledge work is free to attach himself, knowledge worker is free to attach himself, herself to an organization in a variety of different ways, let's say, as opposed to this rigid, full-time, time-based expectation. I think that's going away.
Yeah. And I think also the way we kind of approach this rewards recognition system has shifted a lot. What you mentioned, right? Donuts and ping pong tables are not essential anymore for the people who want to join the community, the team. It's more about the freedom, about the flexibility, about the some kind of chance to actually change the environment. Anyway, I find it super exciting, and that's very interesting what you're doing with your mission, and that we're seeing how we can actually activate more people for this whole knowledge work and to make it more accessible. That's a big, you're on a big mission.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think the thing we haven't said is that I think the most talented people in the world want to work for purpose-driven organizations.
Yeah.
Um, and together, those companies and those people can absolutely change the world.
And sometimes it's not the geographically kind of located people, but across the globe where you find the shared values and who
Indeed.
aligns with your mission. Look, Jack, we're
Indeed.
getting closer to the end of the episode, but I have a couple of more questions. So one of them, for you as a co-founder, as a founder, someone who's been in the entrepreneurial world for so long. So Oyster, back what was it, 2022, right? When you reached 1 billion valuation and kind of officially gained the unicorn
Unicorn status.
status, right?
Yeah.
So how was it for you? Because usually when someone establishes a company, one of the dreams in the current landscape of the startups is to become a unicorn, to gain this valuation, recognition, exit. How is it for you? Because for someone who is observing that from a side, yeah, it's a great achievement, it's a great result, but it also includes a lot of stress, a lot of sacrifices to get to that point. I would like just to hear your
Yeah.
views and your experience when it comes. What does it take to build this 1 billion valuation company?
Yeah. So, the timing for Oyster was such, relative to other events on the global stage,
Uh-huh.
specifically the pandemic, and even the things that have happened after the pandemic, like the war in the Ukraine and the
Yeah.
global macro economy. We have been incredibly lucky with regard to the timing of these things. And so those events being so unprecedented and extraordinary make it difficult to take away kind of any empirical insight from our experience. Like, we would not be where we are today owes, you might say, mostly to events that were outside of our control. But I would say mostly, of course, because not entirely, and certainly not entirely. And that, even though in our case, the balance between what we did and then what the universe did is so great, I think that will always be the case. You'll always be working with your degree of preparation, the quality and the quality of your own execution relative to the context in which you find yourself. Again, it just so happens that in our case, the context in which we found ourselves was, extraordinary, unprecedented. But the takeaway is, and it's a bit of a truism, a bit of a cliche, to say that in those moments when you find yourself reacting, where your plan meets reality, is when you discover the importance of all of the preparation and all of the thought work that you put into it up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed, I think, sports metaphors in business generally oversimplify things and discount human complexity, but it is absolutely like taking a swing, and that's how it felt. It was it was an incredible pitch, like I said. But had we not been there with the years of preparation, the experience of the muscle memory of working in ambiguity and executing in a first principled way, relative to some simple objectives. It's almost like without that piece, nothing would have happened, right? It could have been the most amazing pitch, the most amazing opportunity ever. And so it absolutely raised the criticality of the execution piece, which seemed to rely on experiences of the past, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Which starts with, and it's ironic because you say, well, isn't it the opposite of experiences in the past to rely on first principles, right? And yeah, but it's actually relying on the historical success of first principles, in a faith-based way, like is I suppose a little bit counter to one of the basic tenets of first principles, which is, you abide only things that are in evidence, knowing that you have the frameworks that you can bring to bear in those situations of high ambiguity at the very early stages of a company, building new products, finding customers for those products, figuring out what to charge.
Oh
In our
yeah.
case, the complexity of the business was a factor relative even to other software companies, where for us the difference between 1,000 customers and 1,000 customers is not just bigger AWS bill, but the other piece about the pandemic is that it created this time urgency that just got thrust upon us all of a sudden. It was as if the opportunity to set our own pace of engagement was taken away. And I hadn't
Mm.
thought about it that way, but that was super stressful, because then it was more like something was happening to you. And of course it was, something was happening to everyone. But in the case of something was happening that was very different to plan, good mostly, but also scary. And
Mm.
it took control away from us. I hadn't reflected on it that way until now, I think.
That's so interesting, really interesting observations. I think we need a separate episode just about the founder and mental health, and in general how to go through this whole uncertainty. Final question. Would you do anything different if you would go back in your whole entrepreneurial
Yeah.
career?
No. I think it's a happy person who says no to that very quickly and
Mm-hmm.
easily. Feel super blessed, humbly so. And so no, I wouldn't change anything. I love the planless of my career trajectory. It makes sense in hindsight. It's kind of like a new river carving itself over the land. It has kind of a destiny that you can see ultimately. Oh, it's going to the ocean, but like exactly how it makes its way over the land, sometimes going around things, sometimes digging through things. I'm a fountain of metaphors today, Zivile.
Mm-hmm. You
Sorry.
are. I'm
I
enjoying it
can't
to
I
listen.
can't avoid them.
Music to the ears. It sounds like basically you're just allowing the things to happen and just flowing also with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
serendipity. And you have a trust belief, right? You
Yeah,
trust in the process and see where it leads, and then you just accept it the way it is.
Yeah,
and learn from
and
it.
this, of course, has important connections with like my spirituality,
Uh-huh.
and it's sort of like, which is a whole other area that we didn't talk about at
Well,
all.
if you have time, we can still touch base. What does it mean for
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
spirituality?
yeah.
It's a
I
very
mean,
common
I
topic in
think,
nowadays.
I believe in karma, but the
Mm-hmm.
thing about, karma is just people, right? So it's not like this magic thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I try to live very respectfully, very humbly with this sort of idea of being in service to that through it's like, I'm a person and I have control over my own actions and my interaction with other human beings. I think that in that space is where all the magic that we need in the world can absolutely happen.
Was it always that way?
For me,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You might call it curious. You might call it open, ready. Like, yes, yeah. Like, um, I got that from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
She was a spiritual adventuress.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Trying different things throughout my young life that opened my mind and other parts of me as well. So yes, I guess I was always like that.
Do you have some daily rituals that you do to keep yourself grounded in this noisy world?
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, one of the I suppose latter life lessons about spirituality is the importance of physical to that peace, and that's really bringing those two things into a kind of a whole, as opposed to thinking, I have my physical stuff, or I'm working out, and then maybe I'm not doing anything at all about well-being. And so the most productive exercises are the ones that are rooted in both. And so I like yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I had this as part of my early day, just as a way to kind of get in my body, which is, of course, what you mean, get grounded. It's
Mm-hmm.
funny how much spiritual experience is actually physical experience. So the sooner you realize that and work it into your daily practice, and I think that the better off you are. I'm also a gardener,
Oh, really?
which
Okay.
is a huge metaphor for me, a life standpoint. I haven't always had the opportunity to have a garden. It's kind of new, but I find that there is this affinity and an understanding has been ready and eager, and so I'm enjoying the symbolic practice of putting things into the earth with expectation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So symbolic practice putting things into earth with expectation.
Yeah, that's just my poetic way of saying planting things. I think
Okay.
it's very powerful to plant a plant. When you put something in the earth, you make a commitment.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to take care. I've thought about it. I'm being an
Mm-hmm.
agent here in natural processes. Maybe I have an aesthetic vision. Maybe it's something
Yeah.
else, but that act is staring. And
Yeah.
it's transformed my relationship with time also. Like, you look at uh, what it means to plant a tree. Everything else is flowers in a vase by comparison. So it has, through gardening, I have come into a deeper, fuller contemplation of other aspects of my life. So I say
Beautiful.
to
So,
me, to me,
yeah, talking about contemplations and all the karma things you mentioned. So, I have this tradition in my podcast to leave the listeners with some kind of thought to ponder through a day. So, what would be one thought or insight you would like to leave everyone who is listening right now to this episode to ponder for the day?
yeah. So we've been talking a little bit about um, spirituality, and so in that vein, I would offer that what you believe can absolutely change what you can do, what is possible for you. So choose wisely.
Jack, thank you so much for all the experience you shared today. It's definitely 1 hour. It's not enough for that. So I'm pretty sure we're going to come back more. We already have some topics where we put some interesting hooks. Where can people find you? Where can people follow your journey?
I'm on LinkedIn. Anyone is free to reach me at jack@oysterhr.com as well.
Amazing. So I'm going to make sure we put the links and your email in the podcast description. And thank you so much for joining today. It was Jack from Oyster and it was Zivile. And guys, thanks for tuning in and see you next week. Have a great day. Thank you so much.